next thing on this chapter, the different muscle fiber types. Okay, so this is going to sound very weird, but think about dark meat versus white meat. So it's really the same, similar in our muscles. Some of our muscles have more white fibers, lighter, and some of our muscles have more dark fibers instead. Okay, so slow twitch fibers. These use the oxidative phosphorylation, or meaning the cellular respiration, doing all of these steps to make ATP. And they're resistant to fatigue because they are making a lot of ATP. These slow twitch fibers are more red. They have a more of a red color because of the protein myoglobin. So myoglobin, we saw on a few slides ago, myoglobin is the protein that holds oxygen and brings it over when the muscle cell needs it. So myoglobin, when it holds the oxygen, it has a red color. And also these fibers have a good blood supply, mini mitochondria. Um, and one down point to this is that they are slow to contract. Because they have to rely on all those steps of cellular respiration to make ATP, it does take a little bit slow time to contract. Okay, then let me go to this bottom one here. Fast twitch glycolytic fibers, on the other hand, these ones, they don't care. They can just do only glycolysis, only the anaerobic. They do produce lactic acid, but so because they don't have to rely on oxygen, because remember glycolysis does not require oxygen, so because they don't require it, they have less myoglobin, and as a result, they are lighter in color. So there are more whiter fibers. So because they don't need as much oxygen, they don't need a blood supply to come in, fewer mitochondria. Um, they do actually have more sarcoplasmic reticulum. Interesting. And so these are the lighter colored ones. And then there are the intermediate ones, kind of in between. So these muscle fibers, they can do um, both glycolysis at times when it's needed, or they can just do the full, steps of the cellular respiration. So as a result, they have an intermediate amount of globin, myoglobin. Their color is more, it's kind of in between white and pink. So of course, you would not be able to see the color differences on the cadavers or the cadaver pictures, but this would be more microscopically seen. And so what I want you to know, what we need to know, is the difference especially between the slow twitch and the fast twitch glycolytic fibers. So know that slow twitch, these have using oxidative, or they want to do cellular respiration, all those steps. They are darker in color because they have a lot of myoglobin. Okay, versus the fast twitch glycolytic. Know that this one only uses, or most like usually uses glycolysis more than doing those all steps of cellular respiration, and these have lighter colors. Okay. A few more things here. Hypertrophy means the enlargement of the skeletal muscle when after exercising, training, and atrophy means decrease in the size. If you don't use your muscles, then your muscles are going to be weaker and smaller as a result. When we do aerobic exercise excites the slow twitch fibers in our muscles. And so then in response, fibers, if you do more training, more of this aerobic exercise, so running, speed walking, this will increase capillaries, meaning those blood vessels. So more capillaries go to our muscles, and the capillaries are bringing the oxygen to our muscles. And also, muscle cells increase the numbers of mitochondria. And so both of these is to increase the cellular respiration capacity to make more ATP. Okay, so aerobic exercise increases capillaries and mitochondria in the muscle cells if you do more of that. But if you do more of the strength training, lifting weights, forceful exercise, so I'll write down here, so for example, lifting weights. This type of exercise stimulates more of the fast twitch fibers, but know that forceful exercise or strength training, this causes more actin and myosin filaments to be produced. And so if you add more of these filaments to each of those muscle cells, those muscle fibers, then the muscle gets thicker, larger, stronger as a result. Okay, so know the difference between these two. And it's not like one doesn't happen in another type of exercise, but it just means that if you do more of the aerobic exercise, this is what's happening. Capillaries increase, mitochondria increase, and forceful exercise, actin and myosin proteins increase. Just a few things about smooth muscle contraction. It is a little bit different than skeletal muscle, and it's different than the cardiac muscle contraction as well. This is showing a smooth muscle cell. The one on the left is showing when the muscle cell is relaxed, and the one on the right is showing when it's contracted. And so when the muscle cell contracts, it gets shorter as a result, you can see here. So here the muscle cells, they have also the thin filaments and the thick filaments. So here the thin filaments are these thinner lines, but you can see how here it's not the same shape, like the arrangement as in the skeletal muscles. You can see how it's a little bit different. Okay, let's go. Oh, and if you remember, smooth muscle has no striations because of the way that the thin and the thick filaments do not look the same as in skeletal muscle. So we're not seeing those lines here. Okay, so smooth muscle contraction, it is similar to skeletal muscle contraction. There is still an interaction between actin and myosin. They still have to attach to each other. Still, calcium is used, ATP is used. Membrane impulses, meaning nerve signals, are activating or causing contractions. But different in these ways. Smooth muscle has no troponin, but uses this other protein called calmodulin instead. For skeletal muscles, only acetylcholine was used, but here for smooth muscles, another neurotransmitter called norepinephrine may also be used. When we get to the nervous system chapter, we're going to see that acetylcholine causes contraction in the digestive system, smooth muscle. So acetylcholine is going to increase digestion. Norepinephrine instead reduces the contraction in smooth muscle. But then it's different for the blood vessels, so we'll get to that later. And hormones can stimulate or inhibit smooth muscle. And so that is part of the autonomic nervous system. Stretching can also trigger smooth muscle contraction. So what this means is after you eat, your stomach stretches because there's food inside now. When the stomach stretches, this causes electrical signals in the smooth muscle. And then the smooth muscle ends up producing contractions on its own. So it does not depend primarily on nervous system stimulation, but it can actually contract on its own. And smooth muscle is slower to contract and relax because it does need to do all those steps of cellular respiration to make ATP. But as a result, because it is making a lot of ATP, it doesn't get tired out, so resistant to fatigue. Okay, let's go over here. Now, I know this picture is not the best, but this is just showing. So here it says this is the smooth muscle. Cytosol just means the inside of the smooth muscle cell. And we're seeing here, this is the thick filaments. Oops, sorry. And here's the thin filaments. So we still have those. The actins still have that tropomyosin on top of them, but now no troponin in smooth muscle. Okay, but instead, we're using calmodulin. Oops, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why it's making those lines. Calcium comes in, and here at the bottom, I wrote down the list of the steps. calcium comes in, attaches to this protein, calmodulin, and activates it. Okay. So then once calmodulin is activated, it goes to another protein. So now this protein is called myosin kinase. Myosin kinase then activates myosin. So it's basically energizing myosin. But before myosin kinase comes in, myosin cannot do anything. It needs that myosin kinase. And only then, after myosin gets activated, then myosin can attach to actin and pull, and that will lead to contraction. Okay, so the main thing here is know what calcium activates, which will then lead to the contraction. It's calmodulin. Calcium activates calmodulin. Cardiac muscle contraction, just almost exactly the same as skeletal muscle contraction. There's still the thin filaments, the thick filaments, and they're arranged just like with the skeletal muscle. So cardiac muscle is only located in the heart walls. It has striations. And remember the intercalated discs were those borders between the cells. Now, the only difference between cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle is that cardiac muscle can contract on its own. It contracts on its own. So it's similar to the smooth muscle. It's able to produce electrical signals on its own. It does not depend on the nervous system. So if the nerves going to the cardiac muscle were cut, the heart would still contract. And even if you take the heart out of the body, it will keep on contracting. Origin insertion we already learned about, and it was also mentioned in that video. Origin is the start of the muscle, it's less movable, and insertion is towards the end of the muscle, and it's the more movable end. And so when a muscle contracts, insertion is pulled toward the origin. Here we're seeing some of the terms we need to learn. These are referring to the roles of muscles in performing different actions. So for example, in bending or flexing your elbow, during walking, doing different things, how the muscles have to work together. So here, agonist. Agonist just refers to a muscle that causes an action. So muscles are all agonists, basically. They all cause an action. So no prime mover. Prime mover means the muscle that is primarily responsible for a movement. Yeah, and it says here, in some cases, the terms agonist and prime mover are used interchangeably, but no, prime mover, it does most of the work for doing the movement. Then synergist. Synergist means the muscles that help the prime mover. So great example of this. So we have the biceps brachii, our arm muscle, but biceps brachii flexes the elbow, but it cannot do it on its own. There is a muscle underneath biceps brachii called brachialis. So we're going to learn about this in the lab portion. Brachialis is helping biceps brachii. And so as a result, brachialis is a synergist to biceps brachii. Okay, then if a muscle does the opposite action as the prime mover, then it's called an antagonist. So an antagonist, muscles whose contraction causes movement in the opposite direction. Or just think opposite action. So biceps brachii flexes the elbow. Triceps brachii, which is on the back of your arm, triceps brachii extends the elbow. So because they do opposite actions, they are antagonists to each other. Okay, then the rest of this chapter is showing the different skeletal muscles that we have to learn. I am making the assignments for this that you will have to complete on the publisher's website. Okay, then the other thing we're going to go over will be the muscle origins, insertions, and actions for the major muscles. But this is basically the end of this lecture. I suggest that you go through the pictures that come after this and go through these. But we will do most of the learning on the publisher's website. Well, thank you guys. I hope this was helpful.